Welcome and good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Esteves. I'm the Executive Director of the Lenny Zakim Fund. So thank you for joining us this morning for this Bridge Builder event entitled Building the Bridge from Startup to Success. So today we have with us three dynamic leaders: Tina and Chéry of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, Gregg Croteau of UTEC, and Jude Goldman, my predecessor, the former executive director of the Lenny Zakim Fund. We also have Brent Tracy, who is an ASL interpreter, with us today, as well as you'll see that there's closed captioning, the automatic closed captioning at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And this video is being recorded so that we can post it to our YouTube and Facebook channels afterwards. So with that being said, the Lenny Zakim Fund is a public charity that funds grassroots nonprofits in Eastern Massachusetts. We fund about 50 small organizations per year that are really under the radar but doing dynamic work focused on social, racial, and economic justice. Two of those organizations, the Peace Institute and UTEC, we were one of their, if not the earliest funders, and they've remain and also grown tremendously and remain strong, thriving, very important organizations in their communities. So Tina and Gregg and Jude will engage in a conversation this morning to learn more about their journeys and their stories, but also the ways in which the Zakim Fund was helpful along the way. So with that being said, we have a Q&A in the chat that you'll be able to submit questions. We can admire Gregg's beard and everyone's virtual or real backgrounds and bookshelves as well. You can rate them in the chat. So with that, I will pass it on to Jude.
Well, thank you, Eric. It was an honor for me to serve at the Lenny Zakim Fund, and it's a great pleasure to see everything flourish so well with your leadership. This morning's conversation brings us together with two very well-respected and longtime leaders in our community. As you know, Chaplain Clementina Chéry of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute and Gregg Croteau of UTEC. They're going to share their stories, their organization's growth, including challenges, setbacks, success, and service, and also talk about the role that the Lenny Zakim Fund has played in their organizations and in their own lives over the years. You know, success is a funny term. Not every community organization is going to demonstrate some of the expected hallmarks. Building organizations that last for decades, serve as many people, or demonstrate the innovation and growth of UTEC and the Peace Institute. But every community organization, no matter their size, will or their mission, whatever their history or their longevity, shares a vision of justice and equity with the Lenny Zakim Fund, and every leader is committed to serving the community with impact. The Lenny Zakim Fund was fortunate to be there when both UTEC and the Peace Institute were very young. In fact, Tina, I think unexpectedly showed up at in your kitchen or something like that. So that's so interesting. And the fund is doubly fortunate that the leaders of both of these organizations have remained in relationship with LZF over the years, serving on its board and sharing their experience with us all here today. The Lenny Zakim Fund has, as Eric said, plays a role in the life cycles of many small grassroots social justice organizations. And I invite you today to hopefully and critically consider the role of not only of LZF, but philanthropy in general, broadly speaking, the role that philanthropy can play in supporting organizations through their life cycle. And a little bit, I think you may know these people. You certainly received some of their bio with the announcement. Chaplain Clementina Chéry is a Latina of African descent who immigrated to the United States from Honduras when she was just 10 years of age, a little girl. And after her son, Louis D. Brown, was tragically murdered in 1993, she and her former husband honored his memory by starting the Peace Institute in his name. The mission of the Peace Institute is to serve as a center of healing, teaching, and learning for families and communities impacted by murder, trauma, and grief. And as we think about that, and perhaps Tina, you'll talk about that, that's many communities, I think. The Peace Institute's vision is to create and sustain an environment where all families can live in peace and all people are valued. In 1999, young people in Lowell had little to do and nowhere to go. So they organized themselves to launch the United Teen Equality Center. 1 year later, the teens wisely hired Greg Croteau, an extraordinary youth worker then and an amazing leader now, to become the CEO of the organization known to us today as UTEC. UTEC's mission and promise is to unite and nurture the ambition of our most disconnected youth to trade violence and poverty for social and economic success. Today, in addition to Lowell, UTEC is serving Lawrence and Haverhill. And like the Peace Institute is nationally and in fact internationally recognized for their work. Greg and Tina have each received many, many, many well-deserved honors. And just a few, Greg has received the prestigious Robert Wood Johnson Community Health Leader Award. And in 2014, he was honored with the greatest contribution to social work practice by the National Association of Social Workers, Massachusetts chapter. Tina has been named one of Boston's 100 most influential leaders of color. I would put her in the top 5. So when I get to do the ranking, that'll change. She holds honorary doctorates from Holy Cross, Mount Ida, and Regis Colleges, and was the guest of Senator Edward Markey at the 2020 State of the Union, something I'd love to know more about at another time. So thank you both. Thank you. And I have a startup question for both of you. I'm curious and would love to know a bit about each of you personally, and specifically, what are the values that brought you to the work and keep you in this work, because you've stayed with it, and that's not easy. And if you can, tell us something about what in your work brings you joy and inspiration. So Greg, I'll go to you first.
Absolutely. Jude, thank you. Eric, thank you. It's great to be here. And it is an honor anytime to be on a panel with Chaplain Chéry. Tina, excellent to see you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know I a bunch of folks here online as well. I look forward to when we can kind of all be in a circle together. But it's great to be here. And I would just say, it'd be fun to kind of have a conversation with Tina, and I know we're always learning. So if someone has an idea, here, please, happy to kind of have a conversation now or moving forward. Yeah, so in terms of how did I want to make sure I caught the question, Jude, how do I kind of a little bit about me in terms of how I got into the work? Was that your?
On your values, and as you stay in the work, as you have,
yeah.
As demonstrated by your gray beard,
Yes.
what are some of the things that bring you joy and inspiration? Gray hair, I can say it.
Yeah, no, yeah. I saw my mother the other day, and she was pretty emphatic about get rid of the beard. So it's happening. It's going away. But yeah, no. When I started, I had hair and no beard. So, yeah, no. I started. So my background is a proud youth worker. I'm actually originally from the Revere area, and really, had an opportunity after studying in Vietnam and doing some other work in my graduate work, come back and kind of knew what I wanted to do. And I really lucked out, because at that moment, in time, there was a group of young people who really led the charge to get UTEC founded. And so there was about 15 young people who really kind of want to have their own kind of safe haven. And so I lucked out being to be able to be a part of that. I'd say, and that, UTEC, and we'll talk about it. I mean, UTEC started very, very grassroots. And I think, the conversation today is, thinking about success. And I think success, as you said, Jude, doesn't necessarily mean the budget size or even the numbers served, right? And I think as we talk, we can share a little bit of our learnings, in that space. In terms of like what's driven me in this work and what kind of keeps me going. It's actually yesterday, Valentine's Day was my work anniversary. Makes it very easy to remember. I got hired by that founding group of young people 22 years ago. And unfortunately, I still love my job. I still have the ability to kind of do some youth work. And when I first got into this work, I think for me, the reasons I think about it now are probably a little bit different. So, I was adopted through the foster care system. When I got into this work, it wasn't because of that. The reality is I just kind of fell in love with it, right? I fell in love with street work. I kind of felt like this is something I could be myself and just had really no boundaries, right? Like you could do a lot of different things and not, quote unquote, untraditional setting. And I think as you do it, as I was able to do more of that, you could see the importance of normalizing this work, right? And so street workers aren't seen as unique now versus, 22 years ago. But I think ultimately, for me, a big kind of drive now is, I was very fortunate, right? I was adopted by my parents. I was very fortunate to have a social support network, right, through that. So when my dad died, early when I was 20 and my parents got divorced, even before that, a variety of different challenges, I knew I had that social support network. And I think as I think more about it, that was by chance, right? I was very fortunate to be adopted into that. And I think everything that, we do, and I think collectively all of us on this Zoom is like, how do you take chance out of the equation, right? And I think so when I first walked into the work, it wasn't with that lens, but I think about it now. And I think what keeps me going is knowing that like, there's more work to do. We've accomplished a lot, but I still love it. I learn from our young adults and I learn from our staff every day. And if I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it. So I'll stop talking because I want to hear from
Yeah, well,
friend
thank
Tina.
you. Thank you, Greg. And Tina, different journey, but if you could share with us your thoughts on the same question or sort of the same question, a little bit about yourself personally, the values that keep you in your work, and something that you can share about what you do that brings you joy and inspiration.
Oh, thank you. My brother Greg, it's good to see you. I know I can't wait till we are able to connect in person. Eric, thank you for this opportunity to really share. I think, for me, I it's kind of a bittersweet to be able to talk and to answer these questions without again really talk why I got into this work. For me, I was a stay-at-home mom. Who looks like me and stays at home and not work and only one paycheck? Remember, my friends would used to call me an inner city wannabe suburban mom. Why are you staying home, Tina? Don't you need to work? And I realized that I needed to stay home. It's not that I could afford to stay home, but the way the world was in our society, I needed to be home. Lewis is my oldest, and him going to school, I wanted to make sure that when he came home from school, there was a warm body to greet him. There was someone to be here for him so that he is able to process what happened in school, what didn't happen in school, and really providing a safe space for him to come home to a warm house. And that's a decision that was made, and it was an important decision because today I can celebrate the fact that it's a sacrifice we made, or I made, to make sure that Lewis came home to a warm body. I think also getting into this work, I often tell people is death kicked my door down. Again, the violence within our city, the violence within our community, and especially in communities of colors in urban settings, it's always about the problem, and it's always bringing young people. And I remember Lewis asking me a question, am I a problem child? And I'm like, boy, what are you talking about? He's like, am I a problem child? Why is it that every adult is always blaming young people? When good things happen, every adult celebrates, every minister, every politician celebrate the success. When bad things happen, is these young people, and then we're blaming single mothers. Am I a problem child? And to me, it wasn't until I tell people when he was killed is when I realized, oh, there is something here. If Lewis was alive, I would not be doing this. I would still be living my comfortable wannabe suburban mom's life. You know, with my two younger children, Alexandra and Alan, and Lewis, I would have been happy. I would have been comfortable. Yet when Lewis was killed, I tell people is when I woke up. I then took the blinders off and I realized I did everything humanly possible to provide a framework, to provide a culture, to provide a loving environment for my children. I failed in taking what I provided inside to the outside of my community. So when Lewis was killed, I didn't want to focus on who killed Lewis Brown, not at that time. I wanted to really show others that people in urban settings, we do raise our children to have goals, dreams, and visions. We do that. As poor as we are, we do that. And that's when I realized how I was contributing to the cycle to the blame, shame of community. Because when I would hear of young people being killed, there would be this sense of sadness for the family. But then when the media would say, well, you know, they were gang involved, they were known to the police, there was this sense of relief. Oh, that will never happen to me until it happened to me. And that's when I had to take off my blinders. Our children within our community do not deserve to be killed. And no one raises their children to kill. So we're losing at both ends. So that is what kicked me into starting the Peace Institute. And it was really to teach the value of peace through literature and community service learning. And our curriculum was the first in the country that included the teaching of loss and grief as part of our children's social skills. And here we are 20-something years later as a full-fledged organization. What brings me joy? It's a complex question. What brings me joy? Lewis would always say he was going to be famous someday and would not have to work hard for it. And so it's kind of double-edged sword because he did work hard for it. He gave his life. You know, like the young people that hired Gregg to do this work. Lewis hired me to do this work because it is through his goal, through his vision. He believed that if true peace and justice was to be achieved, it would be up to his generation, regardless of which side of the streets they come from. And so it brings me joy that this young man in his young age had a vision. And it is because of his tragic death, he hired me to then create the Peace Institute, and having an amazing staff, diverse staff of elders and younger people, and that now is really bringing his vision to reality. So I think that's our interconnection with UTEC is, again, young people are leading. The young people that hired Gregg and the young man that hired me to do this work. So it's an honor to be here with you, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tina. Greg, are you gonna?
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, and I think folks probably know this, but yeah, I mean, I think the work that you've done, Tina, not only in this area, right, but it's just spread, right, nationally, right? Like this, this type of work, shouldn't be optional, right, for certain communities. And so I just want to, thank you because, it's really, you're creating a movement much bigger in such with such huge importance. So I just want to thank you. So really appreciate it.
Wow. Tina, that's such a powerful story. What if you can describe very, very briefly, because we're going to have, I'm sure I have a lot of questions and so do the participants today, but what was the Peace Institute's work when you started? You started with the curriculum. And can you give us an overview of the breadth of the work today? And, everybody loves statistics, changes in budget size, staff size, how you've seen those typical markers of growth from where you started with services, money, and humans to where you are now.
Yeah, so I'm learning stats. I'm learning to value stats. That's why my team, I give them credit. It's one thing to tell stories, but I know other people, they need numbers. That's what satisfies them. So starting with the Peace curriculum, it was just us. We had no staff. Today, again, I'm still a baby in this journey. I run a staff, I think it's a staff of 30. My staff is on there. So please correct me. I have a staff of 30. I now have 2 co-directors that are dealing with the day-to-day work, 2 amazing young people that, again, were Lewis's generation, Alexandra Chéry Dorelis and Rachel Ann Rodriguez. Rachel does the finance and administration, and Alexandra is the services and training. So here you have 2 young women that are now taking their rightful place. Our work is within 3 pillars, services, policy, and training. And each of these have a manager under them that then have staff and Peace Fellow interns and volunteers that are then doing this work. I could have never thought in my wildest years that we would be at this level. I now have my board approved 2022 budget of $3.5 million. I can say it without choking, Jude. I can say it without choking. $3.5 million. And we are really looking to transfer our knowledge, our training, and our publications. Our Survivors Burial and Resource Guide is in 3 languages now. Our Children's Activities Workbook is what we want to make sure that every family who has a child whose loved one was murdered has this activities book. We're working on producing now the court proceeding, Survivors Court Proceeding and Resource Guide, to really make sure that we're training survivors on how to now go through the aspect of the criminal justice system. Our Live in Peace Fund, which provides financial support, again, just to really assist families with their day-to-day life, over $150,000 we distributed last year. Our Rest in Peace Fund, again, families don't plan to bury their loved ones. Not every family in our community has life insurance or burial insurance. Cemeteries want their money up front, and that's what we put out. Our state victim compensation is a reimbursement. So our survivor support coordinators really work to make sure that the families can bury their loved ones with dignity and compassion. We respond to almost every homicide, and not just homicide, suicide, people that died due to overdose, people that died due to COVID. It's a part of the work that we have been able to provide. Our reentry team working with those families whose loved ones are in prison and are ready to come home so that we don't get to meet them when their loved ones are dead. And then our policy really looking, how do we bring the voices of survivors to the forefront that goes beyond guns and gangs and give a Black child a job. And then our healing and recovery programs that, again, really taking these families to train them, to educate them, and so that they can become the architect of their own inner healing. that's it in a nutshell.
That's it. That's a lot. And thank you for that. And thank you and your team and Allie and Rachel and everyone else for all that you guys do. Um, I think we all appreciate it. Many of us know the Peace Institute and you primarily through the Mother's Day walk, and that nutshell brings the rest of the year home for us. And Gregg, I'm turning to you with same question. Overview of UTEC, your work and services today. And again, you know, the statistics, how you've grown over the years from a staff of Gregg to the staff you have now, and all that other good stuff.
Absolutely. So yeah, we started out, and again, credit to the founding group of young adults. They got a grant from the city of Lowell at that time. And folks who don't know UTEC, we started in Lowell. We now serve Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill. So we're really, Merrimack Valley focused for our direct service work. And so they got a grant of $40,000. So we have a budget of about $40,000 when I started. And fast forward 22 years, I guess I've choked many times. It's like Tina said, when we think about the budget, it grows and grows and grows, but it really grows to support the needs of our young adults, right? And so our budget now is about 13 million, and we serve 800 young adults altogether, but we serve intensively about 150 young adults as well. And then we do childcare and policy work, and so there's a range of different services, and we've added that over the years. So when we first started, we were really focused on kind of cultural arts and street work. Lowell has about 25 different active gang sets, and so really that was the focus, right? How do we bring kind of priests on the streets and provide a safe haven in downtown Lowell? And since then, it's evolved, and it's evolved from the input of young adults and staff. And so our young adults were having challenges in terms of where to go for different work opportunities. We created, our own social enterprises, and we kind of shifted our we really narrowed our target population. So when UTEC first opened up, it was like anybody and everybody, 13 to 23. And then we kind of went through our own process and narrowed it down and said, look, we can't be everything to everybody, but let's make sure we identify, where we can kind of have the most impact and where we think we're, kind of best positioned for that. And that really has now been young adults, 17 to 25-year-olds. And we often say, that the young men, and we're about 70% young men, that, that 10% that might be engaged in 90% of the action on the street. That's who we want to really engage, because we know through them, they have the ability to transform an entire community, right? And we can walk alongside them and be there no matter what. We can kind of open those doors. And so we have street workers that go on the street, do a lot of gang peacemaking work. We have street workers that go behind the walls and do in-reach, making sure we're engaging those young adults and bringing them into UTEC. And so once you're into UTEC, it's about their education, their employment. We have our own social enterprises. We do everything from cutting up mattresses to making cutting blocks that are sold at Whole Foods, and we have a food services program. But those are really just the platform, right? For us, I would say like our social enterprises, it's really ultimately like it creates a safe place to fail, right? And so young people can be here with us and get ready. And we will never, we talk about like values. One of our core values, the idea of a clean slate. We know we can't be a second chance program. We need to be equipped to be like an 8, 9, as many chances as it takes, right? And our other value of chipping away. So when you have the combination of chipping away and clean slate, for us, those are, really important values to drive the work. So young adults come into UTEC, they have their education, they have their employment, they have all the wraparound services. We made a commitment to provide free childcare for all of our young adults who are parents themselves. And we do a lot of policy work. So a big focus for us, and actually one of the kind of new programs we're most proud of is, in addition to a young person have a career pathway in woodworking and culinary, we also now have created our first ever organizing crew. So young adults can come in and it's just, in essence, have a career pathway to be organizers or a policy or any, area in that field. And so that's a huge piece of our work as well. And so that's a snapshot of UTEC.
It's a great snapshot, and I am the proud owner of the cutting board. It's terrific.
Thank you, Jude. We appreciate it. My
Well,
mother has like 3 of them, but she doesn't use them. She's like, oh, they're too nice. I'm like, Ma, I can get you another one, but she's like, so
No,
every
not
holiday
for
she's like,
every
oh, another
day.
cutting board.
If I'm cutting something up for company, it comes out. So
Thank
I'm
you.
with your mom on that one. I think I see a lot of commonalities here with both of you. Some of what just jumps out right away is that you both, whether it's social enterprise or publications and training, you're both doing earned income, right? In addition to grants and donations to support the work. And you're both involved in public policy. I think from where I sit, that's where we can really impact change. And I think it's interesting that your evolution in the work brought you both to policy. And even though you have different missions, you're working together with the people you serve to see that our public officials and our civic sector is being held accountable. So thank you for that. I have another question for you before we get into you and the Lenny Zakim Fund, and actually, it's kind of questions. In what way did you ever feel like you were taking one step forward and 2 steps back? Someone once said to me that the journey is not straight up the mountain. And I think that's true for all of us in every part of life. And I'm wondering, Gregg, did that ever seem like it was UTEC to you?
Oh, sure. That was probably this morning too. It's probably every day. Absolutely. So I think that and some of those are very good, right? They're healthy kind of challenges, right? But speaking of policy, I mean, I can share a little bit about the policy work as well, but I think it wasn't unintentional, right? So like our young adults, when we were first starting, I mean, we're standing next to young men that are unfortunately shooting at each other, right? This was not incredibly popular, right? There was pushback, there was questions. What is UTEC doing? Why are we, supporting, these young adults? There were also many folks that were supporting that, right? But I think, at any program in any city in the beginning, when you have a target population that's kind of very focused in that nature, you're gonna have, kind of some of those challenges, right? And I always say, like, in our first 10 years, we could have been shut down like that on any given point in time, right? Really proud because of our staff and our young adults when you had those different challenges, when people question, sometimes rightfully question some of the things, you had an opportunity to use it as a lens for engagement, right? And how do you really engage and provide it in a different kind of opinion? And so I think that was a big piece. And when we think even about our policy work, like, we were also making sure that young people had not only a seat at the table, but building up political power, right? So that when stuff happens, we can withstand that, right? And been able to kind of do that, and now see young adults come up with their own campaigns. One of the ones that has been most out there is a juvenile expungement that came directly from young people. They helped create all the kind of different components of that and helped advocate for that. And there's ups and downs and all of that, right? But I think just in general, between funding and so forth, I think you gotta know that any given day you could have something really wonderful happen, and at the same time, and unfortunately, Tina knows this, you kind of, I think, as leaders, got to be able to not get too high or too low, because literally I've spent many days that, like, you get a great announcement and then something happens on the street, on the ride home, and it's like, you just got to be able to know, okay, and this is the work, right? And I think that's just something I've learned personally. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. That 2 things in one day is
and it's parallel, because
important.
as you're dealing with the young people, and this is where, again, great match, matches are made in heaven. This is a match made by the Lenny Zakim Fund, and I think that's the power of the Lenny Zakim Fund. It knows how to interconnect. So as I hear you talking about, yes, you celebrate something, and then the minute on the ride home, something else happened, and it's that reminder, I can't stop. So as you're dealing with the young people, I'm thinking of the adults. I'm thinking of their caregivers. You know, we're celebrating, like when we looked at policy, I have an issue with elected officials. I have an issue with politicians because I think sometimes they want to bring, and I'm just going to be honest, they want to bring Black people when it's time for gun control or death penalty. That's the only time they want to bring crime victims so that we can support death penalty or that we can talk about gun control. And then we're left home to deal with the re-traumatization and with the shame and with the blame and stigma. So one of the things for us was amending the state victim compensation. There was a clause in that if your loved one contributed to its own demise, and we know what that means. Those are the young people that are on the streets that end up dead, and then their families are suffering. So we dealt with a system. Yes, we want to put money to assist people, to give people a second chance. But then when they end up dead, we're going to now blame the family, and the family is going to suffer because now the same system that provided support for these young people is the same system that is telling the family your child is not worthy, therefore you are not worthy. So one of the things for us is really working with the Survivors of Homicide Victims Network. It's a statewide network so that we can inform, influence, and impact public policy. And we amended the state victim compensation. Massachusetts is the first in the country that removed that clause. So now funeral homes, families are able to bury their loved one. We still need to work on funeral homes because when that story of the life of the victim comes out, funeral homes believe that they're not going to get paid. So we still have to work on that. But right now, no family is denied basic funeral compensation so that families are able to really work with funeral homes and they don't have to do GoFundMe. So that's one of the things we celebrated. And we couldn't do this, one, without our partners, the Providers Network, and we couldn't do this with the stories of the survivors. And the powerful part of that, there was a mom whose son was killed by a Boston police officer. She testified. And our former police commissioner, Billy Evans, made it clear in his testimony, we should not be punishing the family for what their loved ones have done. And so he supported that victim, amended that victim compensation. And that was done through our Attorney General, Maura Healey's office, to make sure that that amendment went through. And for us, we celebrate even more because it passed within the Criminal Justice Reform Bill. So that is, again, the work that we do while we're doing with similar population. You're dealing with the young people, we're dealing with their families, and both voices need to come to the forefront so that the cycle of retaliatory kill or be killed does not continue to happen. So we're still looking to come up more within our policy work. It's just draining. I'm learning to build relationship with elected officials. And I'm also learning, I'm going to call you out now, because you can't talk about guns and gangs and then you can't support the families when these young men end up dead. Or you cannot talk about reentry and assisting people to come back into the community and then turn around and punish the families when they end up dead. It's just not equitable. So that's an exciting part for us to be able to do that. And again, but it's also hard to do because I struggle in capitalizing or thinking that we're capitalizing by parading survivors and bringing survivors. So I'm also learning the importance of not just bringing survivors to tell their story, but also at the same time provide a space where healing can happen. Because it's re-triggering, it's re-traumatizing. And once we do the photo ops, then we end up going home. and there's no type of support system. So we have to balance the policy and advocacy and the training along with the healing and reconciliation so that we are able to come back home and be productive parents to our living children or to our community.
That's just so powerful and powerfully said. And thank you, Tina. We need the Peace Institute. We need you for all of that work and a whole lot more. You know, I think that if you could tell us a little bit about you and the Lenny Zakim Fund, and then Gregg, I'd like to ask you to same thing, and feel free to talk to each other about it. But for me, I met each of you on a site visit, right? Tina, I think it was just you and me, and Rachel was an intern then instead of co-director. And Gregg, I think I was with Dina and Joyce Zakim, and the Lenny Zakim Fund was already funding you when I came on board. But you're here today, so you're in relationship with the fund. It's clearly important to you. May not have always been exactly what you expected or wanted, but I would, and I think everyone would love to know more about your story with LZF from the beginning and up through our conversation this morning. So Tina, it's about that kitchen table.
So yeah, I know. I struggle every time I tell this story because I wonder, oh, who am I pissing off now? I remember it. It wasn't even I was in the kitchen. It was my then husband Joseph is on the phone, and I hear him with this conversation, and somebody is saying, "Yeah, you know, Lenny." And I knew of Lenny because I've heard of the work that he did. And I says, one of these days, oh my goodness, I would love to meet this man. I'm always struggling. Be careful what you wish for because it will manifest. And so I remember Joseph talking to Lenny. And then when he got off, I heard him said, yes, we want to invest in the peace curriculum. And we're going to give a grant of $10,000. And I remember when he got off the phone and I said to him, so what part of my soul do I have to sell for this white man to just want to invest $10,000? That just doesn't happen. And there was no part of the soul that we had to sell. It was Lenny really being genuine. And Lenny really lived his legacy, his fund is exactly what he lived and the work that he did. And so for me, it's a piece that I took out. So it wasn't just the funding. Is Lenny also attended when we used to do the award ceremony to honor Peace Fellows for their publications, published authors in Boston's Book of Peace. So Lenny would attend the event. Lenny would be a part of the event. I got to know not just Lenny, I got to know the family, but, attended, I think it was Josh's bar mitzvah. I can't remember, but I think attended that. And I remember also being a part of him and some of the members, the founders, Lenny and the Jets, and being able to see them perform, great rock and roll. So it's really not just the funding, but it felt like a family. It felt like a real family. And I remember also when Lenny died, when you see people and you have all the politicians in front and escorted, what Lenny did is Lenny had the community sitting up front and politicians were behind. I remember the late Mayor Menino and the late Senator Kennedy sitting behind me, and I'm like, I think we're in the wrong seat. But that's just how Lenny had it set up. So I think for me, really taking a step out of that and focusing on as a Black Latina woman doing this work, how can I take a page out of what Lenny did and begin to revolutionize philanthropy from a grassroots level. So knowing him and being connected and staying connected to the fund, even through your transition now with Eric and leading us here, is to me the difference and the importance of the Lenny Zakim Fund really being a part of what's called trust-based philanthropy, trusting who you have. And it's not just giving you a check, it's really being involved. And I'll close on this because this is funny. This is when I knew, not funny, haha, but funny, haha. This is when I knew when we missed the deadline for a grant for the Lenny Zakim Fund. And Jude had to call me to tell me, well, Tina, and I know it came from the board, you don't seem to need us anymore. And it was kind of an ouch, yet it was also this reaffirmation we were also over the allotted because we had already exceeded the threshold that they fund. We were in a different cycle. Yet it was this, oh my goodness, how can we forget to apply? So if you forget to apply for something, that means you don't need it, right? Well, no, that wasn't it. That just means that we were still not organized in the back in terms of development because one of our funders, we forgot to apply. So ending with saying that's when our funding ended with the Lenny Zakim Fund, yet our relationship got even stronger.
That's great. Yeah, no.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Just, Tina, not one of the best phone calls I ever made.
So I actually, I didn't have the pleasure, like Tina, to meet Lenny, and you know, I think, you know, I can speak from someone who you know, was part of UTEC from the very beginning, and the Lenny Zakim Fund was one of our very first funders. And I think the great thing about the Lenny Zakim Fund is the UTEC story, right, is not unique. Right. The stories that myself and Tina share in terms of our organizational founding are not unique. Right. I think that's the beauty behind the fund's kind of commitment. Right. It's a commitment to ideas and believing in people. Right. And it's not like an established track record, you know, of years and years. And, you know, not every organization's success is going to be defined in many different ways. Right. And I would argue you don't need every single month to, you know, become 10 million or that, you know, but success can be defined as, you know, really making lasting change. And I think the beauty, I think one of our first grants with Lenny Zakim was supporting our organizing work, right? And you speak of trust-based philanthropy, and we have a lot of, you know, funders that support our work, but even our support of organizing and policymaking, it's becoming a bit more popular, but it's still, I would argue, I would love to see more foundations be able to support that work, right? Of how do you create lasting systemic change, right? Led by folks in the community, whether it be young adults in Lowell or folks, you know, across the state. And so I think Lenny Zakim has totally made that a huge platform, a commitment, right? It's not just, you know, it's helping how to communities make lasting change in areas that maybe some other funders don't. And so it was because of that I joked with Jude. I said, when Jude asked me, I guess it was maybe 5 years ago, to join the board. And I said, I've never joined a board. I've specifically shied away from board because I'm like, I would make the worst board member. Like, you know, I'm like living UTEC every single day, helping support, you know, this and fundraise. And it was very quick for me to say, you know, for my first board to join the Lenny Zakim. And it really was because, you know, what the fund is, you know, meant to UTEC. And I know the folks there, right? This idea of family was clear the moment I walked into the room. And I think, you know, one of the beauties that Lenny Zakim, I wish I took more advantage of it, to be honest, in the very beginning stages, but the training institutes, the connections, right? The legal fund that is, you know, or the legal resources that is open to folks. And so there's a lot of that I think has really helped UTEC over the years, but also the network building, right? The network building, and just Lenny Zakim does a great job of celebrating, right? I still remember, like, you know, the 20th anniversary bash, right? And I think just celebrating the folks that are doing this work day in, day out is hugely important. And I want to apologize to Brent because I know I talk quick. So my apologies for talking too quick for the sign language. So, and I also want to apologize because I'm dog sitting from my daughter. And I have a dog right by my feet. So if you hear like any weird noises, I just want to put that out there. That's Sam. So.
Greg, it's funny you said being on the board. I remember when Jude called me and I said, look, I got to raise money. I can't raise money for you because I don't know anybody that has money like that. So I can't. And so in talking with her, helped me to realize, no, I can't. Because I made some connections, to Jude and to some other people. Well, I didn't know it was about money. I just like connecting. I really just like connecting people together, especially if a funder is looking and asking certain things of me. I don't do that, but you know what? If you go over there, and so that's what I love connecting. And I remember meeting when I met with Josh to invite, I said, look, again, I can do this. One, I don't have time for meetings because again, the Peace Institute, I got to live that. I got to run that. So I don't have time, but I can be there. I can contribute from a community-based organization, and I can contribute to make sure that, again, the values, the mission, the reason why the Lenny Zakim Fund was started does not go 360, because I am one of those success stories. So I stayed on as long as I could, and it pained me because I felt like I was abandoned in my family, yet being true to our work, I could not continue to serve on the board and run the organization. It was just not going to be, it wasn't going to be fair to any of us because we would have suffered. So I appreciate you reminding that of serving and being on the board.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Jude.
Both of your voices on the board were really important. Tina, you touched on that, and Greg, I think you did too, that the family, right? The family is the community, and you are the community. So your voices on the board were extremely, extremely important. And Greg, thank you for mentioning the parties. It was a lot of fun. And
One of the best parties, by far the best funder party I've ever been to, by far. You can
Because you're
hook
really
me up with that
body.
any night.
There's not a lot of this.
That's right.
That's
right. There was
power
like
of
none
it.
of that. Right.
I know, right? It would have been fun without Sting. Who needs him?
That's right. That's right.
And Tina, as you've grown, and Greg, this may be true for you too. I know it more about Tina. You've used the Lenny Zakim Fund model to strengthen not only the Peace Institute but the community. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we received, and it's like, this is where again the policy happens. We have a state line item that goes through DPH, $200,000. And oh God, that's a different story. We got to fight for that every year. I don't get it. But anyway, that's a different conversation. So we received 200,000, and a part of that is we take half of that and invest within the community, the survivors. We created an Informed Influence and Impact grant, and that's managed by Danielle, our policy and network manager. And it's really taken, again, I remember this quote. Lenny has a lot of quotes, but the one that always resonated with me, where he says they have the will. Oh my God, and I always get so emotional when I repeat this. They have the will, they have the creativity, they lack the means. We provide the means. And I realized in doing this work, it wasn't always about the money. It was also about providing the space because, and I'll get to that part, but I remember also when all the violence and the shootings, probably about 5-6 years ago, was happening. And I remember Jude calling to provide a space for the grantees. And we came in and we provided peace play. And it was an opportunity for the grantees to be still and to remind themselves your work continues to matter. And regardless as to what's happening on the national level, stay focused. Don't give up. Continue to do what you're doing because it matters. And that was also, oh, that's the means. It's not always about money. Yet we know money is important. So out of the 200,000, I think it's 100 or 150,000 that we have taken from the state line item and committed to give mini grants. And that's our Informed Influence and Impact Grant. And it's really, for me, is we're paying it forward to the survivors, that we are funding survivors just like me who will not fit or right now do not fit in the traditional funding source, because we don't have the data, we don't have our polished budget, we don't have everything that we know a funder needs. So under Danielle and her teams, that's what we're doing, is creating grants, application, helping them to do a budget, helping them to do a report. So when they're ready to go, when they are ready to go after, I'm going to say additional funding, not real funding, because we are real funding, but additional funding that they can sustain them, they are in a better position. We do for them what the Lenny Zakim did for us, again, through their institute. Here's a budget, Tina. We don't get how you have no money, but you're doing all of this. It doesn't make any sense. So helping us to create a budget, to put the in-kind, to put all the volunteers, to put all the hours. And if you give me money, I can do even more. And so that's what we're doing with them. It's not just about giving you a check, but it's about helping you to report and to sustain. So when you're going after, I'm going to say, bigger money, then you are able to have the data, the impact, and the reporting that as a way of you honoring your loved one and contributing to the betterment of our society, so that we can create this generation of peace, so that the children behind are not into the same recycle or re-traumatization that continues to happen within our community. So we're proud of that. And that's why we raise funds for the Mother's Day Walk for Peace, so that we can sustain the Informed Influence and Impact Grant. And that's called our Live in Peace Fund, where everything that we do is about peace, beginning, middle, and end. And we want to make sure that we are assisting families to continue to live in peace after we assisted them to bury their loved ones, so that they can rest in peace.
That's really, I love those grants, and I think it's, you are revolutionizing philanthropy, and there's no better example of forget trust-based. Trust-based is good, but community-based, originating in the community to support the community, defined by what people, real people, need the money for. So yeah, Greg's giving you snaps, me too. You know, and just something that I think both of you have done that may seem minor to you, but it wasn't, is you both gave up your spaces, I think on a weekend day, right? And Gregg, we had a meeting at your space in a snowstorm, as I recall, and you were very generous in allowing the Lenny Zakim Fund to come into your space for board meetings, and that was much appreciated. And
Least we can do.
And Gregg, your folks catered it, which was absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
So that was good. You know, I thank you both. Gregg, did you have something to say on that before I move to something else?
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think, you know, what Tina's doing, I mean, and I think, you know, looking at the Lenny Zakim's kind of influence, right? It influences the way we're looking at, giving back too. And so, I just want to, credit Tina for being able to do that, right? And we have so one of the things we've learned too is we have a training institute, right? And we definitely gleaned from the Lenny Zakim Fund's, work in that space, right? Because we've made a decision to say we're not going to go into any other community. We just want to dig deeper in the Merrimack Valley, do that really, really well. But then how do we share the learnings? How do we share? We've done a lot of things that we've learned from over the years, and how do we share that nationally? And so we've launched our training institute, and again, I credit some of the good work that the Lenny Zakim Fund has done through the training institute there. They kind of respectfully steal a little bit here and there. So I just throw that into the mix as well.
Good
Thank
peer
you.
pressure to steal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know where LCF stole it from, but probably from somewhere. So it's passing it on. Thanks for that. Something that I think is really true for UTEC and for the Peace Institute is that you have, forgive the cliche, cultures, organizational cultures that are living the values, living the work. And I know for both of you, people who've received services can then go on to become staff members or volunteers. And Gregg, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you and others at UTEC see or define or feel that organizational culture.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the things that I think was very helpful for UTEC about at our midway point, about 10 years, we stopped and we said, where do we want to go? What does success look like for us for the next 10 years? And we went through what's, I guess referred to as a theory of change process. We started with defining our outcomes, right? Really, at the very beginning. So whether it be recidivism or education, employment, what's the compass of what, success looks like. And I think that kind of structure was also a big relief for staff, right? Because the work you do is so many different pieces, like this is where we're going. And then we refined our target population, and then we looked at our programmings. And then we also made sure we didn't stop there. We had to really articulate the values that drive the work. And those values are not only just up on, the walls of UTEC. They, every month we have a new kind of, new staff orientation. We just talk just about the values. So whether you come in as a finance staff or a street worker, what does this idea of contagious passion mean, right? Which is one of our values, or respectful curiosity, right? And ultimately, I always think like one of the things that for years, young people would come in the doors of UTEC and they would just say, mad love. It would be a greeting, mad love, right? And it just caught, right? And that's a value of UTEC. It's almost like our overarching value is this, and folks like, what does that mean? Well, it means like, no matter what, in my opinion, no matter what happens outside, when you come into UTEC, it's like, how do you make you feel like you won the lottery, right? And that's an intentional kind of vibe, right? That we have. It's got to be authentic, right? Because of the folks that we hire who have their lived experience, and we try to make sure we're all in this together to make sure when young people do walk in the door for the first time, it's that feeling of like, oh, this is special. And I think the values have to be real, they have to be authentic, they have to be willing to be talked and discussed and debated. The work that we're doing, like hopefully so many organizations around inclusivity and our DEI work, these are all central to it, right? And making sure like that there's no end date for that, right? That work is ongoing. But if you can do that and you can have values that come up from young adults and staff, it can be incredibly powerful. And so I think we're doing more and more work around that space, and always happy to chat with folks, how we've done that as well. But thank you.
Yeah, one of the things for us is, again, we wanted to move away from always responding and catering to donors. We did not want to always chase where the money is or what donors feel is the buzzword. Forgive me if there are any donors on there, but this is the power of the Lenny Zakim Fund, that you can really speak truth to power. And so for us, again, as an organization, I wanted, how do you sustain yourself in doing this work? And for us, it was really looking at creating not a business plan. We've done strategic plans and we've made them through. So we focus on fundraising, assessment, and growth plan. And paid somebody a pretty chunk of money to get this done. And look in 3 to 5 years, how do we really look to sustain this work? And we focus on 7 P's for growth and sustainability. That's in people, investing in our staff, to make sure that you're working for a community-based organization, yet you're valued. Our programs, our products, philanthropy. I'm an introvert pretending to be an extrovert. People support us really, but understanding how do I really connect with you? That it's not just asking for money. So I'm working on that part. And then profit, policy, and then our place. We are looking to build the center of healing, teaching, and learning. Working with the city on that, we'll share more about that. But we realized that these 7 P's could better define, and each of my departments or our departments can then focus on what we're good at. So that's where we are. We had a retreat, I think it was last summer, to really begin to, how do we unpack this? We have created a culture at the Peace Institute. Our message is peace, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. In the midst of our pain, we are looking for peace. And then our work are guided by 7 principles: love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and forgiveness. That's the culture that we've created. How do we live those? How do we breathe them? It's not just touching, it's not just talking about that. When we check in our staff meetings, which of these principles is our strength? Which do we struggle with? Really finding a way of getting them. The work is important. You must stop and take care. We provide some self-care stipend for the staff. Again, making sure, especially during COVID, during this pandemic, that I think these are my co-EDs, so I'm speaking for them and may be saying it wrong, but our staff, I think they have like every other week, every other day of the week off. I don't know how it's done, but to make sure it's not a part of their vacation or their sick days, but it's just a day that you are off work, and creating those boundaries. If you're off, you're off. Don't answer your phone, don't answer your emails. And then what we decided to look at, we also have like kind of visions, guidelines for multicultural communication. How do we make sure when we're talking to each other, we are aware as to how our actions have impact? But again, it's all about self. It's about learning. It's not about what that one's doing, but how am I showing up and being accountable? The last piece that we added is strength-based leading. How do we lead with our strength base? Again, many funders look to fund you based on the problem. So it seems like you can never move above, because if you're not talking about the problem, then they can't fund you. So we are looking for strength-based. How do we show up? And each of our staff, a part of our onboarding and a part of our culture, read a book called Gallup Strength, and then they take a test, and we're leading with their 5 strengths. I just did a 4-day training. I'm going to become a certified coach, and that's something else that we want to be able to help our community to understand. Let's not let people define us, but the problem that they see out there. Let us take control. But before we can convince people on how we want them to define us, we must first trust within us. Look at the strength. I do struggle, yet I make sure now that I lead with my strength and not with my struggle, for the betterment of creating and sustaining peace within the community. So creating a fundraising assessment and growth plan. Many nonprofits, we don't invest in doing this part of the work because funders always want us to do programs. I can do programs, but if I'm not investing in the growth and sustainability, if I'm not investing in the wellness and well-being of the staff, then the program is just a program. And so it's kind of the both end. We do for our staff exactly what we're doing for the people that we serve.
Tina, I thank you for all of that. And I think Allie put something in the chat about flex days too. And one of the, an issue that confronts everybody in the nonprofit sector, in the social sector, is staff retention, right? It's the work is tough. They could make a whole lot more money going to Google. And yet, I think one of the hallmarks of the Peace Institute is your retention. You know, people stay, they come and they stay. And that, of course, that has to do with the work. And of course, it has to do with your leadership, and it has to do with all of them together. And that's something I have always admired about the Peace Institute. Before we go to questions, and I'd like people to put whatever questions you have for Tina or Gregg in the Q&A, please, and any comments you want in the chat. But I wonder what for you and for your organization, because we're looking at a horizon for change for young people, for survivors, that it's not tomorrow, right? So what, when you think about success for your organization, for yourself, Gregg, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great and important question. I think for us, I mean, success, I think, is a combination of a variety of things. And so, you know, we've developed our own outcomes that's come really from our staff and our young adults in partnership. And so success is making sure our young adults aren't incarcerated. Success on making sure our young adults are advancing their, you know, education and their, you know, employment gains. And success is also around the policy work and the systemic kind of change we're doing. So I'd say those are, you know, very clear metrics, you know, that we have. But I think success is also, you know, when you think back, you know, 20 years and now conversations are happening, you know, whether it be in Lowell, Lawrence, and folks will say, hey, we need to make sure the young adults or UTEC are engaged in that. That's a success that may not necessarily, you know, be clearly, you know, defined, right? And when, you know, I think about the work that our street workers do day in and day out, right? You know, last week, unfortunately, we lost a young man to homicide. And the work that they were doing after that to prevent retaliation was inspiring, right? And throughout the night and all that doesn't show up, right? You don't know what didn't happen necessarily, right? And so, but success is making sure that, you know, that we're all clear on that. We're all clear around the importance of that work, the difficulty of the work. And I think success is just making sure you have a really strong organization with the culture and everyone's really there to support that, so that success, you know, is not on one person, right? When I'm not in the role, the UTEC, the mission of the UTEC that's come from the young adults UTEC continues, right? And having a strong organizational capacity, and I think is another key ingredient, right? That sometimes doesn't show up on our, you know, outcome report cards. And so I'd say it's, you know, a variety of things. And I would just say success is also making sure everyone, your team is happy, right? And making sure you're working at it and having the difficult and conversations that need to happen to make sure folks are, UTEC and any other place becomes a place maybe that where you don't see it outside for a variety of reasons. How can that happen in an organization like the ones that we're leading?
To you, Tina. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think for me, success is now. Just the mere fact, and I'm gonna keep saying this, that an immigrant Latina woman that came here at the age of 10, who had to find my place. Imagine being 10 years old and being told by your African Americans, go back home on the banana boat where you came from. and then being told by your Latina friends, calling you little piece of burnt toast. Now imagine a 10-year-old trying to figure out, I look like my African Americans, but I don't sound like them. I sound like my Spanish friends, but I don't look like them. So really having to find, where do I fit in this big world? So I think for me, success starts with me. You know, my family really grounded me and given me the values not to change regardless of who was coming at me. And again, that's the power of these young people at UTEC, that again, it doesn't matter what it is, they've created something so others don't define them, and that they stay grounded to continue to move forward. So it's only 20 something years later that I'm going to take credit for this thing called success. And I'm going to own it, and I'm going to celebrate it. And because of that, is now having an organization that it doesn't depend on me. Again, Lewis believed that if true peace was to be achieved, it would be up to his generation. Here you have his generation, had he lived, leading the organization, that it's not depending on me. I don't need to be in spaces anymore. It's Rachel and Alexandra that are leading. And they have to catch me up as to what's going on a day-to-day basis. That I can see as measurable success, and then they're leading their team. But the real success, where I want us to go, and this is the other vision, is when we break ground on the center of healing, teaching, and learning. Whereas a one-stop shop with our families of murdered victims, our families of those whose loved ones are incarcerated for murder, the community, our staff, our children, have a one-stop shop to be able to provide space for the survivors network, for the providers network, incubator, a one-stop shop where, again, people can see our community will not be seen as hotspots, but will be seen as peace zone. We're a center in one of the what's considered the most violent part of our city, where you have a physical place where healing, reconciliation, and accountability can happen. The other part of what success look like is what I'm so excited, is the creation of our peace school. We want to create a peace school where our children, and Greg, I think I'm stealing a part from what you guys have. I think you call it generation 2 or second generation, where again, our staff, their children, our survivors, their families can come to a space where what we're teaching the adults, the peace play, the mindfulness, everything that we are learning, we are making sure that Generation Peace has access, that our staff has a place where their children can go to, again, begin to learn. You're still learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. You're also going to learn the value of peace. We're going to learn how to begin to heal and how to stop that retaliatory aspect that's going on. So success will be, the visual part of success will be the physical center of healing, teaching, and learning.
I can see it. I can see it. I can see the building, and I can see all the good work that's going to happen in it. It's quite beautiful, you know. And our participants don't seem to have questions, and I guess that's because you are both just so thorough and open, and I'm very grateful for that and for your sharing. And before we close, I'm wondering a couple of things. Is there anything that you've been sitting here thinking that you would like to say, or you would like to be asked, or that you said, I'm not going to have time, I'm not going to do that, but it's important, that you would like to share with all of us? Gregg?
Yeah, I guess, I know one of the questions we had talked about just in terms of kind of, suggestions, having, both of us been in the roles we're in for 20-ish years. And, thinking back, okay, if I was to get some advice, early on, I mean, I think there's a lot there, right? I would always say there's no one route at all. I can only share like from my lens, some things that I, would have been like, oh, that worked. I wish I'd done it a little bit sooner, type of things to share back. I mentioned this idea of a theory of change, and we did it 10 years in. I probably, if I was to gone back, I would have done that even sooner. But having real clarity to the work in really not only your outcomes and your target population, but how your programs match that, I think is a really important kind of exercise to do as an organization. I would have, and that, because I think that would have helped us to even invest even further into the data side of things, right? Which is really important for us to kind of help create narrative change, right? I mean, we can, as Tina mentioned, there's unfortunately a lot of stories, right? But we also have to make sure like there's a cost impact, right? There's a benefit analysis opportunity in the work we do, right? Of how do we do work a little bit differently that can be, more effective, right? And it's worthy of an investment. And so I think, investing in that, investing in the role that data plays, not just the narrative change, but also to like learn, right? I always say from our staff, data it's not for reporting. It's so how do we learn to be better, right? And if you can point to examples that we change some things because of the data we learned from, then we're hopefully heading in the right direction. So I think that's a piece that I've thought about. I also think it took me a while to think about fundraising in a broad kind of lens, right? So we were applying for grants and contracts. We're now investing a lot in individuals, right? Because we know there's a lot of folks out there who care about the work. And it's kind of a gift for us to be able to say, here's what we do, right? Because some folks will give no matter what. They may not be thinking about the Peace Institute, right? And how do they make sure that there are folks out there that are ambassadors to make sure the people who are wanting to give will be given into the right places, right? There's a lot of places people give because it's in our face every day, right? No disrespect to hospitals or that type of thing, but it's there. There's massive networks around that, and how do you support organizations like the Peace Institute and UTEC and others to make sure we're getting the word out, right? And I think that's a big piece. So investing in key development staff, I think, was another big learning. And then the other piece, we talked about it before, but just making sure that and DEI can mean a lot of different things, right? To a lot of different, organizations, but making sure that work is central to for us, the youth work. They're not separate, right? So when you come into UTEC, you should know whether you're in development, finance, any role, right? Street work, workforce, we're a social justice organization. What does that mean? Right? And how do we live up to those values and make sure that everybody, is engaged in that? And I think setting that platform from the very beginning is really important, right? So folks know like that's our lens, right? You can choose or not choose, but that's our lens. So those are some final thoughts. And I would just say, happy to have conversations with anybody offline. If it hasn't already been put in there, I'll put in my contact information, but you can just go online and Gregg UTEC and my information's there. And always happy to host and have coffee with anybody as well. So
You're on mute.
I can read your lips now, Jude. So don't worry.
Okay. Well, I think Brent has me covered. Gregg, that is so insightful. And if you could put a little PS on that, is there anything in particular that you would want current or former Lenny Zakim Fund grant recipients to know about, staying with the work, sticking with the work, but also how to take advantage of LZF, or what it could mean to them?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, I guess the big suggestion I would have is just ask, right? If you're a grantee, ask. If it doesn't exist, still ask, right? Because maybe, like Lenny Zakim has a really, broad, kind of circle of support, right? And so I use the example of like the attorneys there, have been, providing free legal assistance for nonprofits. As an organization like ours in the very beginning, that was huge, right? To be able to, you know, ask for that and be able to get that. But I also think just being able to say, look, I really could use this consultant, right? And maybe that's there in a training institute. Maybe there could be some other resource for that. But I think that's, you know, a big piece. And I think it's important in the early years because there was just a lot we didn't know. Like my background, I was a street worker, right? I wasn't trained in running nonprofits, right? I mean, I went to social work school, no district, and that was good, but that still didn't, you know, prepare me for the work of UTEC. So I think being able to say, like, there's a lot we don't know, and I'd love to have an executive coach here. I'd love to have a development consultant here. I would just say ask for that, right? At the earliest stages you can.
And I
Solid
think,
advice.
yeah,
Yep.
I think on that also, so it's kind of that both and, because I asked for that in the early. I asked for that because I knew, again, starting this work, high school was my what is it? My biggest achievement. I graduated from high school. I had no college degree, no business degree, but I knew I just can't do this. And I think that there was so much pressure to continue to do, because when the city said, well, we don't do that. Oh, okay, I did it. So can't is not in my vocabulary. I don't hear that. And so working and saying, here's what I need. And again, the Lenny Zakim provided those. But the sustainable part. Finally, one of the funders said, she met Rachel someplace, and she said, so if you had money, what would you do? I says, hire someone to give me a strategic plan. I can work a plan. Boom, it happened. But then here's the strategic plan. Well, okay, so how do I get that to happen? So having the consultants being clear, I would say to the grantees, don't let donors define you. We have to be able to tell them, thank you for your program money. I appreciate that. If you really want to invest, help me to create either a strategic plan, a work plan. Like Greg said, help me to get a consultant. I don't have the money. I paid consultants money after money, and it's like, crap. How do I now sustain myself? So making sure that the staff gets what they need, you will always do the job. But investing in the back end. So I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, an immigrant woman, a woman of color, that it was that pushback. Well, Tina, what do you mean? What do you mean you need help with this? You're responding to murder. Why do you want to? So it's really you knowing what you want, that's your vision, and advocating for it. And if that donor doesn't want to invest in you, then who do they know? And so I'm working as a part of that. One of my strengths in Gallup is individualization. Again, I'm an introvert, pretended to be an extrovert. So I'm now learning, and that's a part of our philanthropy with our development department, is preparing me to go talk to the people who don't look like me, but want to invest in me, but also not to talk about the problem, but to invest in programs that's sustainable. So I know we're down at the hour. I see Eric coming on. And again, like Greg, we are here. A part of what I want to do, I'm going to have a coming out party. I'm going to create my own table. I'm going to create my own peace talk table to have these conversations and be able to help people like me, the way the Lenny Zakim again provided that opportunity so that I can be here 28 years later. And here he is, man of the hour.
You all are the humans of the hour, so thank you very much. I see a lot of kudos and props and shout outs to you all in this chat from folks who have been here throughout this session. But I just want to thank you again. You all three of you are inspiring in your own ways and have done tremendous work to make a difference in the lives of so many. And I think what you shared today was certainly insightful and inspiring for those who have attended and those who will listen and watch afterward once we upload the video. So I just want to thank you again. We didn't have a ton of questions because you just said everything and left nothing unclear. So again, thank you. For those who are still here, I put in the chat that you can visit UTEC and learn more about Gregg and UTEC, which is based in Lowell at utecinc.org. And to learn more about the Peace Institute, it's ldbpeaceinstitute.org. And then also the Peace Institute has an annual Mother's Day Walk for Peace, and that's coming up on Sunday, May 8th. And you can learn more about both organizations online. And with that being said, Jude, any final last words?
I thank you. Thank you, Eric, for this opportunity for all of us. Gregg and Tina, thank you for, I don't know, years and years and years to come of all your good work. And thanks to everyone here. And Brent, thanks for staying with us for all of 90 minutes. Yeah, onward. That's what I have, Eric. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day.